So really interesting, and I'm going to get back on where our journey is. We talked about the roles and responsibilities everybody had. Now Shannon's talked about the CRT, which is really an amazing quite law, which is changing, and already these decisions, I didn't know there was 108. I thought last I was only 84. So there's been a lot of decisions, and those decisions are changing the way that strata corporations, strata council, and property management companies need to conduct themselves, and the way they need to work with a whole bunch of parties. So Veronica and I are going to pick out some of the highlights of some of the decisions, and then this is really some of the take-home information you're going to have on things you should be thinking about when you go back and have your council meetings and talk with the ownership in general. Sound like fun? Okay. So one of the key items that needs to be reviewed for the strata corporation is the bylaws. So in particular, insurance deductible chargeback, the wording of that needs to be addressed. The CRT can be used by a strata corporation to collect an insurance deductible, but only if the wording is very specific. And so some of the wording, actually a lot of the wording that's included in bylaws in strata corporations right now in BC is not going to win you the day. And so it would be, I would say every strata corporation should review their bylaws for insurance deductible chargeback if you have a general meeting coming up, because there's a very good chance that your wording needs to be tweaked or changed. And Veronica and I were talking about the economies of scale here, or the economies of the situation. It might be worth spending $500 with a lawyer to have your deductible made sure it's 100% correct. Because if you're trying to collect one deductible and you're unsuccessful because your wording's incorrect, that deductible could be $10,000. And if you have 3 deductible chargebacks in 1 year, that $500 became very, very cheap. So it's worth having your bylaws reviewed, and in particular that insurance deductible wording really needs to be looked at. Veronica, do you have anything to add on that point?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen there's been actually a lot of decisions just on insurance deductible and damage below the deductible, and strata corporations have been able to successfully collect a lot of those, but there have been a lot of, where the strata corporation hasn't been able to do so has been where their bylaws makes it harder for the strata corporation to collect them. So having bylaws reviewed is a good idea, but not only that with respect to bylaws, but actually knowing the bylaws, because that's pretty key. I think a lot of people make assumptions about what their bylaws say without necessarily looking at their bylaws. So same thing, a lot of people think they have a chargeback bylaw, but they might actually not have one, or they think they might have a bylaw for X, Y, Z, and they don't. So it's really key to also become very familiar with your bylaws when you're a council member.
That's a great point. The other one is rentals. So if you have a short-term rental bylaw, or if you don't have one and you're trying to use a bylaw that's maybe being applied in a different situation, it might not. It's a better idea to have the ownership approve a clear bylaw on short-term rentals or rentals in general. And again, if you're going to have your bylaws reviewed, that'd be one you really want to pay attention to. The other thing we're really noticing, it's a theme, is the need for better communication with the ownership. Because a lot of times we're seeing some of the items go, they don't even go the distance with the CRT, but it's really about owners not understanding the situation or not understanding some major changes that are happening. And so what we're really trying to encourage strata managers to tell council members is to hold town hall meetings or information sessions. So if you have a large repipe that you need to do in the building, the time to spring the information on the owners isn't at the AGM, right? Because you're going to have a whole bunch of objection about it because people don't understand it. So having that trade come in a couple months ahead of time, having a discussion with the owners and explaining things to them makes it so much more clear. We had one situation where a group of owners simply didn't understand how much they were spending in repair and maintenance to fix these pinhole leaks, when really they just needed to replumb. And once they got the information and it was explained to them in person, the vote passed after failing previously. So really information sessions, holding town hall meetings is a great community builder, but it's also going to avoid situations where it's just because it's unclear and the situation arises. So that's one thing I think, I'm passionate about that one. I think it's worth having some wine, some cheese, and getting the owners to discuss, how we're going to change the pet bylaw or something like that, and getting some feedback. Also, you can tweak it a little bit. You could tweak your resolution if it's really important that Cocker Spaniels are included or something like that. You could tweak so that you can get that resolution passed. You don't end up with conflict down the road, which ends at the CRT.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key points, I think, for me, and sort of in the years that I've been doing this, is that owners don't read the minutes. They don't, right? They don't. And so you show up at the meeting and you've been living and breathing the pains of your piping issues for the last 3 years and paying through the nose and talking about it in every single set of minutes at council meeting, and it's in every single set of minutes, and you go to the meeting and the owners don't want to pay the $1.5 million repipe, and you say, and they say, this is a surprise, and you say, how could this be a surprise? It's been there in black and white for years, but they don't read them. And so that's where I think that I totally agree with the town hall meetings, those information sessions. It's you're bringing that information, the key information, to your ownership, for that realization and that explanation of all the stuff that you know that you've been living and breathing for 3 years. You can impart that knowledge to them so that they can actually make informed decisions, so your resolutions get passed as opposed to having battlefields and angry owners at your meetings.
The next is understand the roles and responsibilities, and I think we've addressed that pretty well tonight. And when owners try to understand why the property management company or the strata corporation or the strata council is doing something, I think it's important that we all share with which party's doing what, so that it's more clear on who's responsible for what.